walked into a club here, and honestly, I think my jaw just hit the floor. If I hadn't had such a good experience in those first few nights, coming home at 4 o'clock in the morning, would I be where I am today? Probably not. And I remember just walking around here on the Rinnick and trying to find Wi-Fi so I could actually call my friend, get a hold of him, and actually get, into the apartment. I don't think, other than going to the zoo once, I really left this area at all. It's not in the shop, but there's a lot of trash, and there's a couple people fighting about someone stealing a beer, and it's 10:20 in the morning on a Sunday. It's weird to say that this place right here had such an impact on my life. This is actually the city where I live now. It's funny how it all works. One day of being here in this city until I realized I wanted to change my life. I wanted to move out here. I wanted to build a business and move everything from my life in California out here to Eastern Europe. It was this city nestled in the southwestern part of Poland, a tiny little town of about 1 million people. It was 2014. I took my first trip out here. I don't really know why. It was just something that came up on my radar. People told me it was a good place, so I decided that this was the spot I would come. This is the first of the 5-city series that led me to where I am today, from quitting a 6-figure job, buying a one-way ticket, and building multi-million-dollar businesses. This is Wrocław. A journey through the places that absolutely transformed my life. Starting in Wrocław, the spark that ignited everything in 2014. Budapest, the city that set me free in 2015. Krakow, my dive into the unknown in 2016. Prague, where I lived with the girl who I'd ultimately marry, and my business took off. And finally, Kyiv, a place ridden by war, forever changed, that makes my heart heavy. This is the 5 Cities series. The story begins now. I remember the journey of getting here like it was yesterday. I was living in San Diego, California at the time, and I flew from San Diego to Washington, D.C., to Frankfurt, to Warsaw, to Wrocław. The reason that happened was because I actually ended up getting stuck in Frankfurt because there was an airport strike. The Germans are pretty much always on strike. And I remember I did not get in until about midnight that first night. And my friend was coming from the UK. He was already out talking to girls on the street, and I had to check into one of the apartments over here behind my shoulder. The one kind of right behind the statue, the pink building. At the time, this is 10 years ago, cell phones were not as big of a thing. It wasn't as easy just to take your phone abroad and have service. It was extremely expensive. So I decided not to even have a phone plan. And I remember wandering around this square, trying to get Wi-Fi, trying to call my friend so I could actually get let into the apartment. And like I said, probably 11 midnight, and I finally found my friend, gave him a big old handshake and hug on the street, and went up to the apartment. And that was the start of the entire adventure here in Poland. I was 21 at the time, so naturally, the first thing I wanted to do was go out. So I ended up going straight out to a club with my friend on no sleep after having 5 different flights, and it didn't matter. This is the club area here in Wrocław, and it hasn't actually changed much in the last 10 years. In the US, I lived in San Diego, which at the time, and still is, was known as a Man Diego because we had so many military bases. It was pretty common to go into a bar or a club and have 5, 6, 7 guys for every girl. I remember I walked into a club here and there were 3 to 4 girls for every guy, and honestly, I think my jaw just hit the floor that it was just such a different reality than what I was used to actually dealing with. So everything, just the way people dressed, the way they interacted, it was just so much, I don't want to say classier because honestly we're at, nightclub area, but it was just such a different vibe. It didn't feel so aggressive. You know how it is in the United States. You go to a bar and people are just, because of last call being at 2 o'clock in the morning, people are hammered drunk by 11 o'clock, doing shots. It was just much slower paced here. Doesn't mean it wasn't crazy, doesn't mean it wasn't loud, just very different. And I remember going into that first club, and within 10 minutes, my friend and I had met 2 girls, Paulina and Polina. And we ended up hanging out with them that night, ended up hanging out with them outside of that night as well. The next day we all went out. What a different vibe it was interacting with them as opposed to how it had been in the United States. And it was just so encouraging to me that this part of the world had what I was looking for, because I eventually did want to get married, I wanted to have a family, and I just didn't think with the way that things were in the United States are at the time, and I think it's gotten worse, people are just aggressive, people don't really seem to like each other, and it was just such a different culture and vibe vibe of doing things out here that I was really encouraged, like this is maybe where I need to be. And this really has nothing to do with business, but if not for everything that happened in my life, I would have never been able to build the businesses. So if the cost of living hadn't been cheaper out here and I didn't have the opportunity to actually build a business while living off of my savings, then I never would have met my wife. My daughter wouldn't be here today. It's not in the shop, but there's a lot of trash and there's a couple people fighting about someone stealing a beer, and it's 10:20 in the morning on a Sunday. It's weird to say that this place right here had such an impact on my life, but looking 10 years later of where I am, if I hadn't had such a good experience in those first few nights with Polina and my friend, and going to those clubs and, you know, coming home at 4 o'clock in the morning, would I be where I am today? Probably not. Would I have started Hire UA? Probably not. Would Selo Olive, the olive oil company from Croatia, be a thing? Probably not. As weird as it is, it all started here. It all started in Wrocław, and it all started 1 in the morning after taking those 5 flights to get here, coming here with my friend from the UK, walking into that club, I don't even know what it was called, and looking around and saying, wow, this is where I want to be. So this is Wrocław University, and this is where we spent a lot of time hanging out during the day. And I think it was an introduction to the European way of life for me. I remember though, I was such a typical American tourist. And what I mean by this is that this is the Rynek area. And you look at the main square where we started the video, and now we've gone up a couple streets away from it. All around this island of the main area is the central Rynek area, and then it goes around basically making up the greater Rynek area, you could say. And I don't think, other than going to the zoo once, I really left this area at all. And now, of course, 10 years later, this is actually my home, and I've seen so much more of what this city has to offer, and of course what this entire country has to offer, that I never would have gotten on that first trip. Very stereotypical American tourist is you go to a city, you go to a country, and you go to this one spot and you basically never leave it. In the United States, you go away to college and you live on the dorm on the campus and you walk to all your classes. Here, there are dorms and people do commute across the city to go to class, but a lot of people are living at home and they just commute into the city, or they commute from a village, or they come from their apartment outside of the city. And it's just a very different way of doing things in the US, where you basically pay to go away and you pay to live. And I remember just hanging out here and everybody felt like a local, because people don't necessarily go away for school like they usually would in the United States. Despite that, that initial trip to Wrocław was enough to say, this is where I want to be with my life. Once I moved out here permanently, I had time to explore places and to look at the smaller districts and to see, you know, what the average life is here, because it's a stark contrast to very nice shiny center. And once you go out, you know, and this is true almost anywhere in the world, is that the outer parts are not the same as the touristic inner parts. And it was the first time I ever really realized that. Things were very, very different the way they were working in Europe versus the US, and I liked what I saw. And I remember there was this department store called Phoenix. 10 years later, it just got replaced. It's now a store called Dino. But I remember we got into the apartment. I'm like, I want to take a shower, obviously, and like, let's go pre-game. So we ran to this Phoenix store, and I just remember seeing how different everything was as far as the goods being sold. And I remember just walking down the aisle and looking at the meat. It was, you couldn't get anything in a package. It was all just fresh. And then, you know, we're gonna of course start talking about alcohol here because I was 21 partying all the time, but the bottle of vodka we bought was like a local thing. It's beautiful, intricate design. I think I actually still have it back in California. When we poured it, it was just like glass, not glass coming out, but it was just so smooth and so thick. It was so different than anything I'd ever had in the States. That bottle of vodka was a precursor of everything to come that week. Like I said, a little bit too much partying, a little bit too much fun. It was really instrumental in me ending up where I am today. This is actually the city where I live now. It's funny how it all works. 10 years ago, I was running around, having the time of my life, not a care in the world. Now, 10 years later, after living in Ukraine, I have a family, I have multiple businesses, and this is home, which is weird for me to say sometimes. It's a great city. I absolutely love this place in a lot of ways. Weather could be better, but other than that, honestly, a great city. Everything in life happens for a reason, and honestly, Wrocław is that to me. There were cute girls, it was cheap, and that it was a cool city. That was the extent of my knowledge, and I bought the ticket and ended up coming here. Thank you for watching the first of the 5 cities that led to me quitting a corporate job, booking a one-way ticket to Eastern Europe, and ultimately building my entire life out here. In the next video, we are heading to another country and another city that made a huge impact on my life. And that video was actually shot during our Hire UA team meeting 2024. It was the time of our life. We have so many cool shots, so many cool scenes to show you. And honestly, that city was really instrumental as well. Wrocław that city, and a few others. Those are the 5 cities that led me to where I am today. And honestly, take any one of those out of the equation, I don't know if I'm making this video here to you right now. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next city in the next video.